Hey everybody, I'm Josh. Welcome back to our webcast round 2 today. Hopefully we don't have problems like we did earlier this morning. Let's just go ahead and get started. What do you guys think? All right.
Let's do it.
Okay. So for those of you that are joining us for the first time today, we're talking about VPNs and PDQ and some things that we've done here to eat our own dog food. So this is what we're doing. We're using an SSL VPN, and we are still managing with deploy and inventory. To get started, what I kind of think we ought to do is talk about how deploy and inventory work under the hood. The reason for this is I can't give specific examples on what everyone needs to do in their individual environment. There's just way too many variables. So what I'm hoping to do is arm everyone with the information they need to get your VPN solution to work with deploy and inventory. So what I want to talk about is really the basics of how deploy works. The first thing we do is we do a DNS query and try and get the IP address of the target machine. And then from that point forward, everything that we do is over SMB. SMB on most firewalls, especially through a VPN, is blocked from the source to the target. Most of the time, the target machine can come in for file shares and things like that. But PDQ coming out is the thing that's blocked. If we look at the next picture here, this is what it looks like inside of your normal network when we're usually using deploy and inventory. This is a high-level overview of what it probably looks like for you now. Now we've got some stuff here in the middle. We've got our magic internets, a VPN, and a firewall that we're contending with. All of those things there in the middle really don't like SMB. And to make things worse, they also really don't like to relay DNS entries to your DNS server. Here's an ideal. What I want to do next is kind of explain to everybody what I tried to do and was unsuccessful in doing. And hopefully you can do this, and then I'll provide what I did as a workaround to keep things getting patched. In an ideal world, having your internal DHCP server issue DHCP leases to your target is going to be ideal. Because when you do that, the DHCP server is also able to register those leases as A records in your DNS server. That cuts our target out of it completely. Our target doesn't have to try and register with DNS through the VPN. The DHCP server is handing out that address, and then it's registering it for you. It's also going to do that cleanup on that DHCP server as well, or on that DNS server as well. The reason it's going to clean it up is the setting in the DHCP server, which we can get into. I was not able to do this. The reason I was not able to do this is I wanted to split tunnel our VPN traffic, which is probably what most everyone wants to do. Once you're split tunneled, only traffic that is destined for the internal network comes into that VPN. Everything else just goes out your client's regular internet connection. If you full tunneled everything, likely your firewall is going to get overwhelmed. I wasn't able to do this. So here's what I did instead. I'll show you that we're kind of eating our own dog food. This is a peek inside of our network. This is actually live production for us. I've got 3 laptops here that are currently out and connected to the VPN. And I've got Brake's computer, his workstation that's here in the office and turned on. Our IP scope for our connected VPN clients is this 10.212 address, and everything internal is going to be either 172.16. So kind of show that we don't have any tricks up our sleeve. I can show you that I can scan these things, and you know what? I might even get an error here, which I'm kind of hoping for, because then we can troubleshoot that. While these are scanning, I want to show you what I did with what you might want to do with your DNS server is double check your scavenging properties. Right? Don't forget View Advanced. And if you come into the individual record, come into this individual record here, you want to make sure that you've got this checked. You also then want to come up to the zone, and your aging tab is here. And then you also need to make sure that scavenging is up on the server. And that's under Advanced, and right here. Likely you're going to need to adjust your scavenging interval. The reason that you're going to need to adjust for this is your VPN connected clients are probably getting DHCP leases much faster than they were previously. I would suggest starting to bring these numbers down slowly so that you don't run into problems. The other thing that I really, really wanted to do was create a new DHCP scope and then let it handle my DNS registration. This is done at the scope level. If you are able to do a DHCP relay, this is going to be the thing that really makes this a lot easier. And the things that you want is you always want to dynamically update DNS records, and then you also want to discard those records when the lease is deleted. What this is going to do in an ideal situation is you create a new DHCP scope. You set that lease time to something very short, maybe only 8 hours. A client's going to connect to the VPN. Once they're connected, they're going to get a lease from the server. When they get that lease, this server is then going to take that and register it in the DNS server that is on site. Once that client disconnects for the day or that lease is expired, our DHCP server is going to go in and it's going to delete that DNS record. That's going to keep our DNS clean, and we're not going to really have to mess with scavenging because our DHCP server is going to do most of the work for us. Before we jump into some specific deploy and inventory stuff, do we maybe want to take some questions? Okay. Specific deploy and inventory stuff, do we maybe want to take some questions?
What's the best way to handle DNS for
specific
VPN
deploy and
clients?
inventory stuff? Do we maybe want to take some questions?
What's the best way to handle DNS for
specific deploy and inventory stuff? Do we maybe want to take some questions?
What's the best way to handle DNS for
specific deploy and inventory stuff? Do we maybe want to take some, get into those scavenging records here in your DNS zone? And you're going to want to try and release that, shorten down this time. The other thing that you might want to consider doing is actually in deploy and inventory themselves. In preferences, if you jump down to network here, there's this test multiple addresses and name resolution. What this is going to do is when deploy or inventory query DNS, it's going to get a list back. Maybe you've got like 5 A records. Say this computer is at these 5 different IPs. It's going to look at all of those, and the first one that responds is the IP that we're going to use. So that's kind of the kicker there, is it might not be we're going to check all of them. It's going to be the very first one that responds is the one that we're going to use. So if you've got a couple stale records, that's probably okay. But if you have a lot of stale records, then you really want to look at that scavenging. While we're in here in inventory, why don't we look at some other settings that you may want to keep into consideration here. This one's going to sound a little counterintuitive. This ping before scanning. We normally recommend that you keep this on. The reason we keep this on is we're not going to try offline machines. Here's where it can kind of bite you when you've got VPN connected clients. We only send 1 or 2, I don't remember exactly, ICMP packets to those remote machines, and if we don't get a reply, we call it offline and we just don't do anything. If you've got a fully remote workforce, the latency involved in that VPN might result in that 1 or 2 packets getting dropped, and then deploy or inventory just calls it offline, and then we don't even try. This will increase a little bit more overhead for machines that actually are offline, but it's probably going to give you a higher success rate of actually scanning those machines. Something else you might want to look at is how many scans you're running at the same time. Before, when everybody was on your speedy LAN, you could probably do 32, maybe even 64. Who knows, depending on your machine and your environment. Now you might want to trim that back a little bit. There's a whole lot more going on. There's a whole lot more overhead with that VPN tunnel between everything. Let's bounce back in and let's check on our machines. So it looks like we actually do have a machine that was offline. But with our ping, with ping before scan disabled, we'll actually try it again, and then we can actually show this. The rest of these machines, we actually did just get a successful scan on. Here we are, we had one a minute ago. We see that Chad's online, he's connected to our VPN. We can now deploy to this machine. If you can scan a machine, you can deploy to it. Deploy is able to deploy to IP addresses. So if your DNS is still giving you a hard time, you can deploy to those IP addresses, but inventory requires that successful resolution. So if you can get inventory working, you can get deploy working for sure. You have another question?
Josh, our clients create a DNS record automatically, but we need to manually flush DNS on the PDQ PC frequently. To have clients register their DNS, we enabled on TCP IP properties in the Register This Connection Address in DNS option.
Cool.
Thanks, Christos.
Hey, Christos. There's a couple ways to get around this. Scavenging is going to be your best help, but if you've already got something working where you just have to flush DNS, why don't we just try and tackle that problem, make it a little bit easier. In inventory, if you jump to tools, and actually in the tools library, we have a flush DNS resolver. That's in the library already that you can import. I've already imported it on this machine. Here's all it's doing. It's running as a system tool, so it's not going to run anywhere except for where deploy or inventory is at, and it's just going to run your ipconfig flush DNS. You can give this a hotkey and run it. That still may be a little too manual for you. So here's another thing you could do. You could do a new command step. You can run ipconfig flush DNS, save this, and then attach it to a schedule and just target yourself. For the target, if you just want to target the local machine, you can just use a dot and that'll just target itself. And then you can set your triggers for however often that you've been manually flushing that DNS cache and just let it run locally. Hope that helps. Want to take a couple more questions?
Hey Josh, our company currently uses Microsoft Direct Access, which utilizes IPv6 to PDQ. Are there special considerations I need to make or change in group policy to allow PDQ to push updates to those clients? Thanks, Nicholas P.
Hey Nicholas, I'll just come out and say my only experience with Direct Access has been in a controlled lab. That was a long time ago. But the requirements for deploy and inventory are still the same. So if we go back to our diagram, whether you're running Direct Access in IPv6 in a 6-to-4 tunneler, or if you're running strictly IPv6, the requirements are still there. Still have to be able to get a response from the DNS server on where that machine is in the world. And we still have to connect to that machine via SMB. If I recall correctly, Direct Access is one of those where SMB is only allowed to tunnel in and not tunnel out. So you might have to go change some settings there to allow SMB outbound so that your PDQ machine can talk to that target. Next.
Josh, we're starting down the road of eliminating VPN as a need for our company. Do you have any plans to allow for PDQ to work via cloud deployments? Thanks in advance, Eric P.
Hey Eric, that's something that we're currently looking into. If you're talking about just running everything in Azure or running everything in AWS or something like that, as long as you've got that virtual networking on your cloud instance, I don't see why you couldn't deploy PDQ deploy and inventory as they sit now and let it run on the private network of those cloud instances. Yeah, let's take another one.
Hey Josh, how can VPN clients register IPs on a DNS server configured for secure dynamic updates if DHCP owns all the DNS records? Thanks, Noman N.
Hey Noman, I'm going to assume that you mean that the DHCP server in your environment is the firewall. If it's the Windows device, then we can come back here and we can look at Windows DHCP, and now we can do all of these settings here to allow those to just update. Let's go back at it because I think you're talking about that your firewall is actually the owner of those records. We were in the exact same situation. We use a FortiGate firewall here, and there's an option to specify which DNS server should be used. After you specify that option, you can then create a group policy to tell the adapters to register to their issued DNS servers. Windows is going to do this by default, but if you want to get into group policy and make it a little more aggressive, maybe every 30 minutes, then you can do that as well. There's also some firewall vendors that I've seen out there where in the GUI, it doesn't look like there's a spot where you can specify those DNS servers. But if you get into that CLI or you hit up their support, they can give you the CLI to specify in that DHCP scope which DNS servers to issue.
Do you have any specific examples on which vendors those are?
Yeah, actually, so we run a Fortinet firewall here. The previous version of the GUI, when you were in the SSL VPN settings, you were able to say, you click a checkbox and you could say, go ahead and give me the IP addresses of 2 DNS servers, and it would issue those. We updated the firmware, and that option was then gone, and now it's hidden in the CLI commands. So you might be in one of those situations where in some versions of the firmware it's there, but it's almost always going to be there in the CLI.
How tricky.
They're very tricky. Guys, do we just want to keep answering questions? I mean,
Yeah, we certainly can.
yeah,
Sure.
I think we have a lot.
Hey Josh, will PDQ work over a Sophos VPN? From Bryce M.
Bryce, I don't know, so I think I'm going to drink to that one. My experience with Sophos has strictly been their antivirus, and that was many years ago. Here's going to be my guess. If you can control what protocols are allowed to go over that VPN, then yes, absolutely it's going to work. If you can't, and it's this rigid defined thing that it's this zero trust network and only things can come inbound, you're probably going to have a hard time. But I'm going to drink because I don't know the answer to that one.
Hey Josh, our VPN does not register DNS entries for our clients, and we struggle to manage them. Can you create a simple agent that will, 1, update the IP address stored in PDQ, and 2, allow PDQ Deploy to use the stored IP rather than DNS? Sincerely, Pat.
Hey Pat, understand the frustration. We're looking into an agent or something similar. We're looking into it. I still think we can get this to work even without that. We've gone over a couple different ways to get those DNS records updated, but let's say you're in a situation where you can't even do that. Maybe there's some other things that you can explore. Is there a way in your firewall to say to statically reserve or set DHCP reservations to those VPN connected clients? If there is, you can set those up, and then as much as I hate to say it, there's no reason you can't use a host file in this situation. If those machines are going to connect and they are always going to get the same IP address, go ahead, use that host file. It's kind of the hacky, dirty fix, but you got to do what you got to do to keep patched.
Hey Josh, is there a way to deploy to computers with a NAT set up between them and the PDQ server? Bill J.
Bill, I'm pretty sure that SMB and NAT are not friends. I don't think I've actually ever tried it, so I don't know. I'm gonna wager a guess and say no, but I hope someone can correct me and I'm wrong in the chat somewhere.
Maybe Brig, he's been chatting lately. So.
Oh yeah, hopefully Brig can. Yeah.
Okay, here's a one with a lot of numbers. Hey Josh, the subnet of our VPN is blah blah blah, and our main subnet is 192 blah blah blah. How can I deploy from the 192 sub to 172? Thanks, Nick L.
Hey Nick, we are in the same boat. If you look at this machine here, I remoted into its IP address is 10.0.0.119. I've got machines that are on 172.16.20. I've got machines that are on 10.212.134.168. You've just got to figure out a way to route that. Depending on what is doing routing in your environment, if you're a flat network, it's probably your firewall. If you're not a flat network, maybe look at those layer 3 switches. Is that doing the routing? There's a whole lot of variables in there. Most firewalls have a way when you configure that VPN to allow routes back and forth. And once you've got that route and that SMB policy in place, you're going to be golden.
All right, Josh, we have started the work from home initiative and need to make a change to the AT&T VPN client. I have worked with AT&T and received a registry file that I need to deploy, but every time I use PDQ Deploy, it fails. What is the best way to apply a registry file to PCs? Sincerely, Aaron D.
Aaron, there are so many ways that you can do this. Here in Deploy, if you actually take an install step, if you, I believe you can put a reg file. Oh yeah, I can center that for you, JJ. Oh, yep. Right here, you can use a .reg file. If it's just a reg file, go ahead and throw that here in this install step, and go ahead. Then you can deploy. If you don't want to do that, why don't we use the command step, and then you can do regadd. Or if you're more familiar with PowerShell, you can go ahead and use PowerShell and do it that way. keep in mind that if you want to reference a file for this particular step, you can attach it down here with files, and it'll be copied over when the runner gets to that machine, so you can reference it in whatever command you want. Hope that helps.
Another question?
Yeah, let's keep going. We got them.
Okay, DNS lookups fail for VPN-connected computers. So I am constantly finding users' computers in RAS to find their current IP. Is there a way for PDQ Inventory to find computers on our VPN subnet and translate the hostname's IP addresses to PDQ Deploy? Thanks, Dustin O.
Dustin, I wish there was a way to do that. That would have made my life so much easier too with our firewall. I was able to go through and I could see all of the IP addresses that were issued. I wish I could have queried that, but you can't. Inventory and Deploy are just writing on that Windows networking stack. They're going to use the standard Windows DNS resolution. They're going to say, where's this computer? Give me an IP address. You may want to look at some of the options that we explored previously about maybe some more aggressive scavenging. You might even have to go that host file route. It just depends. There's so many variables in this equation. Just got to meet the basics for deploying inventory. I wish I could provide more information than that.
All right. Dear Josh, recently changed AD DHCP to use DNS dynamic update registration credentials, but some DNS records are owned by the machine instead of the user. Fix? Hopefully, Dominic C.
Ooh, hopefully. Dominic, once you've set this up in DHCP, this should be the owner. That DHCP server is then the authoritative. I'm writing to DNS. Or they may be pulling a lease from a different DHCP server. You're running 2 DHCP servers in your network. Do you have like a failover pair? Is something on the firewall issuing DHCP? Not quite sure how else to answer that question. The only other thing is if I wanted to cover some more stuff on deploying inventory specifically, unless we've got some more questions, guys. I don't know what we're got in questions. All right, let's go ahead and just jump into some more preferences here. So once we're in inventory, we've covered the test multiple names and address resolution. You might want to look at this heartbeat. How often are you pinging? You know, how often are you going to see if that machine's online? Whether it's not, that might be something you want to consider. Performance. How often are you scanning? How many machines are you scanning? The other thing you may want to look at while you're in inventory is your scan profiles. When we were all, on the LAN and things were fine, we had plenty of bandwidth, we were probably scanning for a whole lot of things. Things now are a little more constrained now that you've got machines that are on the VPN and you're contending for bandwidth. This is a good time to jump into these scan profiles and try and figure out, do I really need to be scanning all of this stuff this often, or do I just need applications? Am I just trying to patch, or do I really need to know what GPOs are applied to this machine right now? You've got an additional constraint with bandwidth and overhead from the VPN. It's probably time to take some housekeeping items in your scan profiles. The last thing that I wanted to cover for everybody was just some thoughts that we've had internally on how you do things like push big packages like Office or AutoCAD or things like that. Normally, we'd probably be scheduling those for after hours. Chances are your users aren't going to be connected to the VPN after hours. Here's some things that we thought about internally that might be able to help you in what we're doing. You can set up some maintenance times for your users. Maybe if you've got 200 computers that you're trying to patch, you split that up over the 5 days and you do 40 computers a day. You say to those 40 users, hey, will you leave your VPN connected at 5:30? Go ahead, do all your work that you need to do, have it scheduled, then deploy, and then shut down their computer. When their computer shut down, they know that it's been patched. Something else you could do if you've got a smaller amount is just set a maintenance window for your users the same time every week. Same type of idea, just shut down when you're done. The last thing, and probably the most labor intensive, but the less impact on your connected clients, is to use a calendaring software, something like that, where users can request time and then you can schedule out with them. Guys, that's all I've got. I hope I tried to answer everybody's questions, and Kelly's telling me we've got 2 more, so let's get to them.
Hey Josh, is there a way to schedule a task via PDQ Deploy to help refresh DNS on remote laptops? Thanks, TMS.
Hey TMS, I'm assuming you just want to run a ipconfig flush DNS, we did that here. Rather than target just your machine, go ahead and target those remote machines. Or if you want to register DNS on those remote machines, do an ipconfig register DNS, and then you can be giving it to those machines. This is especially helpful if you can only deploy by IP until they register. Go ahead, grab that list of IPs from your firewall or whoever else is giving out leases, and then tell them to register themselves. Hopefully that gets your inventory a little kickstart and you can start resolving those machines.
And our final question today. Dear Josh, DHCP addresses are issued by the VPN. How do I get that into inventory? Sincerely, Larry.
Hey Larry, same boat. I'm in that boat with you. What I did is I assigned those DNS servers as part of the DHCP options on my firewall, and those machines started registering for me. Then I just got hyper aggressive with that scavenging. Hope that answered for it. Guys, that's all I have. I hope that gives you a little bit more information and you're able to get going with your VPN. As always, if you have questions, we're happy to help and support. Go ahead and hit us up there. And we're trying to be a whole lot more active on the forums, and we can get you some help there as well.
Thanks for joining our Makeup webcast. We appreciate your patience. Congratulations going out to Larry S. and Nick L., winners of PDQ swag. If you'd like to send us your info at webcast@pdq.com, we'll get that out in the mail to you. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here, hopefully, next week.